you look so little. Hi, guys. We are testing, so give us a minute. We love you. We appreciate your input. Yes, I know I'm live. We're going to try to get our guest on, and we're going to figure it out. That's the best part. You never know with... There
he is.
There he is. Sent. This part I can never figure out. There we go. All right, so Tisha, hey, Shirley. So we're just playing right now. We have a guest that we want to bring on, and we're trying to figure out, and we want to make sure that remote is working. So this is Suzanne Oliver. Hey, Shirley. We've got a fantastic guest on, so we've sent him the invite. Looks good and sounds good. That's right. You are awesome. Thank you so much, Diane. We're trying to launch this show, and you know, it's all about, I used to have a producer in town. Love her glasses, Shirley says.
Thank you, Shirley.
And since Charnel left me, I don't have a producer anymore. It's just the old guy, Ted. So we just need Hans to come on, and I probably will not, we'll just go with it once he gets on here instead of recreating this whole thing. Yeah. But we're launching this show. This is actually Suzanne's brainchild. If you want it, did you text him?
I did.
Okay, perfect. And her brainchild, we had talked about doing a show for veterans. Oh, he's there. Okay, Hans. Hans, you should have an invite, or if you don't see it, you're going to have to ask to be a guest, because I can't resend it once I've sent it. So if you can't, Hans is on. Hans is our guest, Colonel Hans Bush. I'm super excited to have him on. And he's being very patient with us. But Suzanne's brainchild was, we always wanted to do something with veterans. Suzanne is a veteran, a Navy vet. Oh, Dallas, blessings and love to you too. And so we wanted to do something for veterans to celebrate our heroes. And then Suzanne came back about a couple of weeks ago and said, let's do something positive. Yeah. Suzanne was my 40th episode many moons ago. It's over 200 episodes ago.
And
which
was
is crazy.
So much fun.
Oh, here we go. Wants to be in your video. All right, Hans, we're working on it. Here we go. Approve. Get Hans on here. Come on, Hans. It's going to happen. We're going to pray,
adding
to the gods here. Here it comes.
I saw a little speck of something. It's adding.
This is the challenge with Facebook Live, and I love Facebook. Don't get me wrong, but when you want to do something remote, unless everything, the stars are aligned, like nobody's business. I mean, once you get a Facebook Live, then you should go play the lottery, because everything has to be in place. So it's adding, which means he has to accept it on your end, Hans. So anyway, so Juliana, hi guys. So Suzanne said, let's do something positive for our heroes. Let's talk to our heroes. And she came up, all credit to her, she came up with the name, Brave, Bold, Brave Heroes, or Brave, Bold Heroes. No, say it. There he is. Oh, he's sideways. So you have, you just have to turn it around, Hans. Here we go.
Portrait.
It's good.
So we didn't want portrait. We wanted landscape. If we can do that.
Yeah, you want yours. Yeah, you just have to turn it. There you. All right. Look at us. We're on. We're on with Hans. I don't even know how to do that. Sideways. I know, Tony. We're working on it.
Hey, not bad.
There you are. Look at that. Yeah. All right, listen. It's most important. Suzanne, who's the pretty one, and Hans, who's the pretty one with the brains, gets on here. Can you? So everybody, welcome Hans Bush. Yay. We made it. Woo. This is
well. Hello, everybody.
Time.
Can we all hear each other?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
I sure can.
Okay, wonderful. So I was just giving the history. So tell them how you came up with the name. Tell them the name of the show, Suzanne, and why.
Well. I decided that it was about time that we talked about something really positive. And we always hear some stories about the VA or about PTSD or something that's always going on in a veteran's life. But we don't necessarily get the true story of a bold, brave hero who's gone from the battlefield to the boardroom.
I love it.
So that's the name of the
It was so good. As soon as you sent it to me, I'm like, I sent it to my social media person. Kudos to Allie McCarroll for doing that.
Yay, thanks,
she's like,
Allie.
I love this. So she created the graphic. And it's an awesome idea, because I think a lot of times you're right. We spend, and I know this show's about Hans, so I'll get to you, Hans. I'm sorry. That's how it usually goes. It's crazy. But I think it's so important for people to see that it's not always, like you were saying, veterans in need. Even though I think it's a huge problem, it's so nice to be able to show that some people are getting out there, how they got out there, how they transitioned out from regular from life in service to civilian life, so to speak. And so I'm excited,
Me
super
too.
excited. So this is Suzanne's baby, and I'm just happy to be along. So Hans, thank you.
Thank you. You were my first choice.
Well, you were her first choice. I'm like, who's Hans? I couldn't even find you on Facebook. I'm like, who is Hans Bush?
Well, thank you guys. It's nice to be here.
Give us a little background. So the way the show normally goes, Doc Sam says hi, Hans Bush. The way the show normally goes is you tell us a little bit about your background, because eventually we want to know your why. And then, of course, we want to know how you went from the battlefield to the boardroom. But people like to hear your backstory. What's your story? So give it to Hans.
I'm not sure I'm in the boardroom. And the battlefield's really more a whole bunch of great adventure over a 30-year career as a Green Beret. It's what I always wanted to do. I decided I wanted to be a Green Beret when I was about 8 years old. Wow. I'd seen the John Wayne movie, and I was very excited about that. And I was a little disappointed when I got to about junior high school and I found out you had to join the Army first before you could be a Green Beret. But I got over that, and I got that part figured out. And then I went ahead and finished all the school stuff, and then came into the Army and served as an infantry officer, because you have to do that first. And as soon as I was eligible, I tried out for Special Forces, and I never looked back. It was a fantastic journey. 30 years went by like a really cool summer.
See, that is, to me, it seems like, especially if you've seen that movie, which we had to watch that in pop culture in college, that movie. I love that movie. But I feel like that obviously doesn't tell the whole story. It tells the Hollywood story of things. Was it as tough as you see in some of the other movies, the more realistic movies? Because I feel like what you did, anything that says special in front of it, means you had to have certain training that would be way above my pay grade. So was it crazy? Was it just like the movies portray? You say it was a summer. I love that. But I know there had to be a lot of work, and thank you for your service, by the way. Again,
the challenges were pretty realistic. The Army's pretty good at giving you tests. Before I ever did any of that, I did the infantry thing. I did airborne school and ranger school and all the things you do to be a good infantryman. And those were all probably top challenges at the time. But they all quickly took their place in the pecking order when I went to Special Forces selection, and then the Special Forces course and SEER school and language school, and then deployed on real missions around the world. It was all a building block, and every block got better and harder, but more satisfying. And the hardest ones were the ones that I look back at most fondly, actually.
You're so
it was a challenge overcome.
Isn't he so calm about it? See, I'm not sure. I'm nervous for you, and I didn't even go through it because I think that because again, my whole point of reference is TV and the movies. So I don't know. I'm not a veteran. I know Suzanne is, so she's much more in touch with this. But I feel like there is so much more to it. And when you say you went on missions around the world, all I can think about is all the spy shows that I've seen. And I think people don't realize that that's real work. Like what goes on, I'm sure the movies only tell you half of it or a quarter of it.
Well, funny you should mention movies, because that's who I work with now.
Good segue there.
Movies only have about 2 hours to tell a story that's probably months in the making. A good example was in 1994. I was with 3rd Special Forces Group, and I don't know if you remember the world events that were going on at the time, but the island nation of Haiti had an election. They had voted a leader in, and the leader of their military had decided he wasn't suited for the office of president and decided to stay in power. And then, of course, we had an agreement that we had to go in and resolve that. Well, there was probably 30 or 40 minutes of pretty good adventure, and that year-long story. These tend to unfold very slowly. Yeah, there's really cool action scenes that would make any stunt guy happy, but they are very brief and they are separated by long, strategically patient periods of time where you really get to know your team well and you get to do a lot of thinking.
So how was it for you to transition out? Because you're out. Are you retired? Technically,
I am retired. I retired 3 years ago. After
put that in, was it hard? I think a lot of people would say after 30 years, was it a difficult thing? And was the transition? Because what we see a lot, Suzanne and I have talked about it, is that when our military are transitioning out into civilian life, it's a completely different world out there. Was it difficult for you?
Well, first of all, the decision to retire was made for me. It's probably normal to love the Army, and I love the Army, but in the back of my mind, I had to understand the Army could never love me back. It's not in the love business. It's in fight and win war business. So at 30 years, if you're at a certain rank, you don't have to worry about making the decision. It gets made for you. They say, okay, that's it, 30 years. Now, the Army does do some really cool things now. And since 9/11, there's been a real infusion of budget, resources, and the whole country has really kind of given their Army a big hug. Not like I had seen in the previous 20 years. And part of that is we spend a whole year getting ready to leave the Army, especially if you have a lot of combat rotations. There's a lot of technical, financial, business, professional. I mean, we even had a guy come in from Brooks Brothers to talk about dressing for a executive interview.
Wow.
I mean, they really cover it soup to nuts, and it was all a great help. And I ended up doing nothing that they suggested and got hired by a really good friend to go work in the movies.
Yes, so the movies. Let's talk about the movies. And then you interrupt, Suzanne. This is your, so if I'm missing questions in between, the movies, all right? So everybody's enamored with movies and TV. So when you went to your first set and you said, all right, I'm the technical advisor, I assume is what you were, or some kind of title like that. Did you go, guys, you're doing it all wrong. You have to be doing it all wrong.
Well, the inner monologue was pretty much doing that all day. But on the outside, I also understood that I may have considered myself an expert when I was in uniform, but the second I stepped on a movie set, I became the brand new amateur.
Right.
And everybody I met was an interview for my next career. And every one of them had done more movies than I had.
Sure.
So the good news is the better the project and the higher the risk, the bigger the budget, the higher the quality of the folks are that you're gonna work with across all the departments. And the best ones just want to make a great movie. And that means not letting you be all goofed up either. So I kind of embraced that whole approach to it. The first thing I usually do with actors is our first meeting is kind of a little cold, a little directive in style, a little bit of a shake-up. But we don't stay there. We can't stay there. As I work with them through the course of the week, by the end of the week, we've transitioned and we're ready to do a mentor relationship thing. Because now we're going to work together for 4 months every day.
Right.
And the last thing I want them to think when they see me coming onto a set between takes is, oh no, here he comes. There are people that have that effect on a set, and I didn't want to be one of them. And you develop good friendships and an affection for these guys, and you want them to do well, and you want the director to do well. and you want the studio and the movie to do well so that you get hired again.
Where does your calm demeanor come from? Because I just feel like anybody who has served our country, there's always this underlying, you've got this patriotism. You sacrifice so much for our country, and now you're talking about doing a movie, like you're transitioning to a movie, and you haven't even remotely raised your voice, or you can tell you're calm. And I know it's not just for the camera. You can't be that good. So where does that come from? Like, do you yoga?
No, I think it's a matter of perspective. There have been several opportunities to see me not very calm, and this isn't one of them.
Good. I mean, I don't know. It would make for great TV, but I'm impressed by that, because I think as you're talking about your career, obviously you're giving us the quick version of it, and I appreciate that. But you can tell that you're passionate about it, but you don't come across at all angry, or not that I would expect that, but I think a lot of people think if you've served special forces, you've got this thing that you're carrying around with you that a lot of people obviously have never experienced.
I think what you'll find in special forces or the Green Berets, it's the same thing. The same term gets tossed back and forth. You're going to find a lot of folks with that kind of they're kind of stress hardy. We select for that. We have a very deliberate process. Our selection and assessment is probably the biggest challenge I went through in my life, in training anyway. And they really peel back all the things that you're used to being comfortable with, like sleep and food and weight and pain and warm and cold. And when you get all the way down to it, they want to see who's out there that's going to get frustrated, and who's really stress hardy. And we pick the stress hardy, and we pick the folks that even when they're not at their best, they still make sound decisions. And then we build a whole regimen out of that, and that's the result. That's what you're going to get when you do that.
So do you? And go ahead. I'm sorry.
It works. It's a great system. I would do anything, anywhere, at any risk, with another Green Beret, and it wouldn't worry me about it.
So the term "I've got your back" really means something.
Yeah, because there's a lot more shared than just being in the same unit.
Well, yeah, there's a brotherhood and sisterhood there, a camaraderie that all of us who have not been there, we don't understand. We think we get it, but when you are putting your life on the line and trusting somebody else to have your back, it's different than in a bar fight or an argument about a TV show. This is life and death, and I think people want to have that. So I'm always so enamored or respectful of when I hear you all talk, any veteran talk about their relationship with their regiment or their company or their other soldiers, because I think that's something we all kind of would love to have. But it's really a matter of learning how to do that when you can't not be with somebody who you don't trust in that situation. I feel like. Yeah. So tell me, I have a question for you. This is my observations by Ted, by the way.
Okay.
Question for you on, do you counsel or work with any veterans that are transitioning out of the military? Are you still active or involved in anything, or is your movie career, your current career, keeping you super busy?
Well, the answer to the second question first is it's busy when it's busy. It's episodic work. They generally shoot in the fall and winter, and the summers are actually a lot of my time. Now, getting back to the first part of that, I don't think a day goes by where I'm not engaged with another veteran, even if it's just to exchange pleasantries or to talk about how things are going with their support from the VA, or how to find other veterans because you miss the brotherhood. And that's why I joined the Special Forces Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. they found me. In fact, one of them found me riding in the Badlands of South Dakota. I had just retired. I was on kind of the gringo version of a walkabout, I guess, clearing my head, riding my motorcycle out in the Badlands. And one of the brothers came up to me with a vest, and he said, it was the last gas station before he committed to the desert. And he said, who are you and what do you do? And I told him, and then SF guys have a way of talking about what team or unit you were in real quick. And then it didn't take long to realize we were both from the Tampa area. And he goes, well, we have a motorcycle club, and that's something you should consider trying out for. And you won't be riding around all by yourself in the desert anymore. And so when I got back, I did. I went and rode. We're a traditional 3-patch motorcycle club, which means you go through 3 kind of phases. One is where you're a guest, you hang around and you ride with the guys, and they decide if everybody's going to click, and then you go through a period of prospect, which isn't different than any other motorcycle club, and that's where you're less of a guest and more of a prospect, doing the things prospects do, and it's a chance for the club to really give you the sniff test and decide if they want to patch you in and call you brother, because once that happens, it's a very, very deep and all-consuming commitment. Any of my brothers were to call me 24 hours a day, we would travel anywhere in the world to help each other. And that's a pretty neat tribe to belong to. And it's not, we don't just lift the tent and everybody rushes in.
Right. What do you think, what is something that, like, as a civilian or somebody who's not been in the military, what would you want us to know? Because I feel like there's a lot of us, I do a lot of work with veterans. I try to raise money. I try to be as involved as possible. But I think there's a lot of us that don't know the best way to get involved. I think a lot of us don't know the best way to raise money, what the need is. You really can't listen to the media about anything anymore. So people are struggling. I've had a lot of people come up to me and ask me, well, doesn't the VA handle that? And I'm like, okay, even I know that's not true. The VA does not handle that, or that. But so how can we do better by celebrating and helping our veterans?
Probably the first most important thing is everybody's got a veteran that lives next to them. They're either a neighbor or up the road, or they go to church with them, and we're kind of social knuckleheads. We kind of stick out. So if you go, well, that guy's got no social skills. He's probably, maybe he's a veteran. I should say hello to him, and introduce yourself. And I got to tell you, it sounds corny, and we've heard a lot of it since 9/11. I didn't see so much of this before 9/11, but I did see a lot of it after 9/11, where folks would just come up, have a hat on or a shirt or an emblem on that they realize I'm a veteran, and they just come up and say, "Hey, thanks for your service." And it seems corny, but it really does feel nice.
I love that.
So that's a nice thing. That's a cool thing. But if you really, really want to commit, there's some great nonprofits out there that are every day helping veterans. We're actually a nonprofit ourselves. We're a 501c 13, I guess. 3 is that? I hopefully your robust production crew has a lawyer in there, and he can tell me which one. He can tell me which one we are. But we're actually a tax exempt veterans organization. We can raise funds. We do raise funds, and with those funds, we run our organization, which allows us to do different things during the year. But we also contribute funds that we raise to the Green Beret Foundation, that's probably our mothership for fundraising. They take care of the families and children of our Green Berets that have been grievously wounded or killed in action. And for the wounded, we fall in on a house we'll see that ramps and doorways get widened so that they become accessible. The children of fallen Green Berets get scholarships so they can continue with their education. And sometimes all the family needs is to know there's Green Berets out there ready to put their arms around.
Right.
And we do that all year long. We do that among ourselves, and then we do it when we hear there's a brother or sister in need. There's also the Special Forces Association, which is that's kind of our professional charter, and as an organization, they're nationwide. We all belong to that as well, and there's fundraising and charity efforts that go on with that. Probably one of the more interesting things, my president and I and a couple other guys from our club, we got contacted by some folks in Plant City that said, you know, a homeless veteran had died in Tampa, and they had no luck at all reaching family or friends or anyone that even knew him. And he had served in the Army for 6 years.
Wow.
He had gotten out, and then he had gone off the radar and homeless for 20 years. And he died in Tampa, and all they knew was he had that. So we got organized, and we got there, and we gave an honor detail, and we rode in his formation with our motorcycles and our vests, and we filled in for his family, who no one could find.
Wow.
And that's just kind of another thing that we can do as a club. It's the kind of thing we do.
And I think the people,
but
let me tell you like a couple of the things that are going on, and I'm not putting you on the spot. I think that a lot of us really don't know where to go. So these kinds of, that kind of assistance and help, when a lot of us get tasked with it out in the civilian world. I'm probably using the wrong term, but that's what I keep hearing. All right, civilian.
You could call it the real world.
We get tasked with it, and we don't know
in the real world
resources. We don't know how to reach out. I've got somebody currently that has come to me, and they are just they need some help with very small things that will help them grow further in their outside of the military career. And I would have thought there'd be a million different resources for that, and I couldn't find a single one. But that's also, I'm not doing all the research that I could probably do, but I think that's what happens. You do some research and then you stop.
Absolutely.
Well, first off, there are a lot. There are a lot. In some cases, it almost feels like there's too many, because you know how Google isn't always helpful. Sometimes Google is an explosion of links. Sometimes Google is an explosion of links, and you really got to go treasure hunting to find which one was most helpful. You can't go wrong if you reach out to another vet that you already know, because I would just about guarantee that one of those organizations has helped him or his family or a close friend recently.
Agreed. That's true.
There's there's the Wounded Warrior Project, there's the Special Forces Association, there's the USO, there's the Red Cross, and the VA takes an awful beating, and I got to tell you that it's not always well deserved. And in Florida, Orlando especially has got a brand new massive clinic right there in the Orlando area, and there are good people in every organization. Agreed. And the VA's got some good people in there. And the one thing about getting wire brushed all the time is sometimes it does up performance, and sometimes it makes people feel they're held to a higher accountability, and that's kind of what's going on right now. And so I wouldn't write them off. I'd kind of reach out to them right off the bat, and they also have a finger on the pulse of all the resources. If you want to be considered, the category we discussed, 501c3, 13, whatever the code is. If you want to be that and veteran, chances are you need to be in a registry of good standing with the VA and with the Department of Defense. But there's a couple things people don't realize. The VA is not part of the DoD. The Pentagon doesn't run it.
I think people don't realize that. They really don't.
It's its own department. It's its own cabinet position, and in some ways that puts distance between the military and the VA, and in other ways it kind of keeps a little checks and balance thing going. I'm not sure that if we were staring down the barrel of a major World War III and we had to choose between a couple of nuclear carriers and a VA hospital, that may not be in the best interest of the VA that day for that choice.
Right.
So that may be why there's that separation between it. The other thing a lot of people don't understand, or I think a lot of people don't realize, is if you serve in the military but you don't retire, unless you have a service-related medical condition, you don't get medical benefits. You don't get retired pay. You don't get medical benefits. You don't have dental. These are all the things that happen when you've earned a retirement. And if you get out in less than 20 years, you haven't qualified for a retirement unless there's a medical thing.
This particular gentleman that I'm talking about, I didn't know that until he told me. And I thought somebody's feeding him a line, but it's not. That's absolutely true. It's 20 years is the mark, right? 20 years?
Right. 20 years or a special determination because of a medical situation.
Now I have many questions, but I have one last question for you. And then Suzanne can jump in or you can share. We get a lot of requests from veteran organizations, and I use the quotations around that. And I think a lot of people donate money to a lot of organizations that aren't legit. So what's the best way, in your opinion, I'll tell you what I do in a minute, that we can vet those better? I actually go to a Marine that I know, and in about 3 seconds, he's ready to shut those people down, or he goes, yes, Ted, they're good. But a lot of people don't have that connection. They don't know what to do. So what can we do? Is there any site that has that? Is there a best practices for someone? Because then I think what happens is they get burned. People get burned, and then they don't want to donate anymore. They don't want to do stuff.
There is a pretty quick way to get there. If you're a tax-exempt veteran fundraising charitable organization, you have to have an about link or a contact link on your website. And if you tunnel in there, you're going to see about, and then you're going to see operating cost and distribution. You gotta kind of drill in a little bit, but it's there. And if it isn't there, they're required to provide it if you ask.
Right.
And that really opens that's the combination to the safe. Because it costs money to run these things, and if they've got people working full time, then and that's their only job, then they get a salary and they need to, but it shouldn't be extravagant and it shouldn't be lopsided. If you're operating at the 20 or 30% to run the thing, and that other 70 or 80 is in distributions to meet the mission that you've raised money for, then you're in good standing. You're a good outfit. A hugely successful organization took a real beating a few years ago.
Yes,
their board of directors had at first glance really big salaries, extravagant travel, very expensive conference stuff.
Yes.
And the distribution to what the mission was supposed to be didn't appear to be keeping up with that.
Right.
And so there was a wire brushing, and the house got cleaned, and the guy that was the president was pulled down, and a new guy was sent in there to clean the story up. In fact, the new guy that was sent in there to clean it up was a friend of mine who I served with in Afghanistan. And they are in good standing now, and I expect will remain in good standing for quite some time. I don't want to mention the organization by name because I'm not their spokesman. But
I think any of us that are aware, if that makes sense. All right. Do you have any questions before I ask him for his parting words of wisdom or anything that Colonel Bush wants to share with us? I love that.
I know. Actually, one of the questions I have is, when I went in the military, I didn't have any family that had been in the military. And so it was just such a big difference for me to go from college to the Navy. And I knew I had a love of aviation, but I didn't have anyone to really rely on. So I'm curious, if you don't mind backtracking a little, what was your, I know you said 8 years old, but what was your status of your family, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I come from a large family. We had 9 kids, 6 sisters, 3 boys. We all served. My older brother was a Marine. My younger brother is active duty Green Beret. Actually, he's also in Special Forces. My father was an infantryman. He fought in the Korean War, and then he went on to a career as a school teacher. And I've got nieces and nephews that are out there serving. In fact, I was coming home from Afghanistan on one trip, and I passed through an airfield where we were catching a flight, and just totally out of the blue walked right into my nephew, who had just rotated back from Iraq.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and my son is an infantryman serving with the Army. He's in the Florida Army National Guard right now, and he's working his way through Special Forces trials.
Congratulations.
So
amazing.
Yeah.
It's in the family. It's in the family.
So now that you've seen others go through it, what advice would you give someone who's new, who wants to go into either the Army or Special Forces? Do you have any advice you can give somebody?
Well, I guess if you want to go in Special Forces, the first thing I'd say is be patient, because you got to go soldier first. And you got to learn the skills of a soldier before you can try out for that sort of thing. I would say listen to your dad.
Good.
Especially if dad served or if your uncle served. I would sit down with them and go to lunch with them and have a good long talk, because it's not just a contract you're going to sign. It's you're going to give yourself up in totality for the years that you serve, and that shouldn't be entered into lightly. Talk to somebody you trust. Don't go to the recruiter without your dad. Bring your dad or your mom or your brother or your uncle. And don't make a decision while you're in there. Kind of like going to buy a car.
That's really good.
Test drive.
Yeah.
Go home, do some research, get a good interest rate.
Yeah.
Let the fever come down a little. And then when you feel your heart's out in front of you, follow it.
Great advice. Well, I've known you for a little while, and you have such a way with words. My favorite thing, one of the favorite things about being around you is your ability to toast. So we have coffee.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Wait,
Are you
let me
able?
get some. Yeah, okay.
Suzanne may have coffee, but Ted Bogart does not have coffee, just for the record.
Actually, I do believe it's grape flavored
coffee.
coffee.
No, I was allowing you to say whatever, yet it's grape flavored coffee.
All right. Well, that sound you hear off camera is me preparing.
I like it. So
okay.
As he's doing that, Joe's right. So somehow we have to figure out, you and I are going to have to get super close next time.
Yes.
We'll use the big boy next time.
We'll get close.
We'll get close. But Joe Toma, I saw your comment.
So hopefully your viewers are at least in the central and mountain time zones. Or no, correction. I hope that there's some that are, well, I guess they'd have to be watching us in England right now.
I have one who's in Afghanistan and Special Forces watching.
Oh, they're definitely in the time zone. I just want to make sure that we don't violate Scotch 30 here in an effort to do a toast.
We're good.
No such thing on this show, my friend. No such thing on this show.
Floor is yours, Hans.
Well, before I do that, I would be remiss and probably counseled by my club if I didn't mention that, we talked about veterans and we talked about how we raise some funds. We do that twice a year. And our next one is coming up on the 17th of November in the Tampa area. Anybody who rides a motorcycle that's interested in riding with Green Berets, helping us raise some money for some good guys and some good cause, come to the Brandon Harley-Davidson on the 17th of November. And I'm going to give you the exact time here. You know, when we went to the iPhone 10, you're supposed to just look at it and it's going to unlock. But not always. Okay, so the 17th of November at Brandon Harley-Davidson in Tampa, Florida, we're going to have a poker run, and registration's at 10 o'clock. And then the kickstands will go up and we'll start riding at 11. So are you familiar with what a poker run is when it comes to motorcycles?
I am not.
Are you guys?
No.
I know Susan is, because she's had to hear us talk about it. Basically, it's anybody who has a love for motorcycles comes together, and it's designed to fundraise. And so folks pay to be part of it. The poker run piece is you're going to go to areas of interest in the local area, businesses, VA posts, VFWs. And when you get there, you draw a poker card. And at the beginning, you have a little score sheet. So every stop, you draw a poker card. And when you get to the last stop, you'll have 5 cards, you'll have a hand, and that gets turned in. And of course, the best hand wins a prize. The worst hand usually wins a prize. And then we have fundraising. We have charity auctions, we have raffles, and then we have a good time. And there's usually a cookout, and this one will have a cookout at the end. We're going to end at a place called Kelly's, which is a friend of ours who has a kind of a pasture land and a farmland, but he also has a really neat outdoor. He built this really cool tropical cabana club and has a big barbecue. It'd just be a good time. So anybody in the area, you're more than welcome to come join.
We'll share that when we post the show.
Yes, and there's also raffle
and you'll
tickets.
have a good time.
Raffle tickets.
And we're selling raffle tickets for a three gun raffle. Each ticket gets three attempts. So if they pull your ticket and you win and you get a gun, your ticket goes back in the barrel and spins again. So it's kind of a neat deal. It's a pistol, rifle, and shotgun. And there, have I, Susan, have I hit the plug? You did good.
You did good, man. You did great.
Okay.
You did good.
We'll share everything. I promise.
All right.
And
well,
we appreciate what you guys do. I mean, you guys really do some good stuff. So if people are wanting to donate, and especially as it gets close to Veterans Day, your club really does some good stuff. So we'll continue adding that to our shows also.
Of course.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you. Okay, so
so now
we want to toast. We want to toast, huh?
Should we stand up?
All right. Well, we'll all be off camera if we do that. Let's pretend we're standing.
Okay.
Okay. Here's to the military that we talked about today. Here's to the veterans, past, present, and our sons and daughters that are going to be the future veterans. Here's to a nation that has demonstrated nothing but love for their veterans and their military since 9/11. And here's to my truest hope in my heart of hearts, that this passion continues for decades to come, because civilization is only skin deep, and somewhere out there, evil wants to scratch the surface. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, that was good. You were right. Usually when somebody tells me they want to make a cheers online, I'm like, oh, this should be really good. But I knew immediately when he started talking, I'm like, okay, we're safe. Drink up.
The total chill.
Well, there was no profanity or
no, listen, I never know what I'm going to get.
Politically incorrect references.
Awesome. You've been a joy. Thank you so much for putting up.
Well, this was a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing more of your shows, guys.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for agreeing to be our first guest.
Yes, thank you.
You're our guinea pig, but you'll always be number one. Always be number one.
Safe travels.
Safe travels. Thank you so much. We are very, very thankful for your service.
Well, Ted and Susan, thank you very much.
Yes,
absolutely.
Sir.
All right.
Bye.
You all, thank you for tuning in.
Bye, guys.
Everybody.
We love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you in a couple weeks.
See you in 2 weeks, right? 2
right,
weeks.
with our next
2
veterans.
weeks. All right. Love you guys. See you later.